Good morning again, and welcome to Business Wise Insiders. So in a moment, I'll start the presentation. And as usual, I'm going to keep everyone on mute for that portion of the session, just to keep things smooth and moving forward. Presentation will run for about 20 minutes, after which we'll have a breakout discussion where you'll get a chance to introduce yourselves a little bit more, ask questions, share ideas about today's topic or any other business development challenge or priority that's on your mind here at the start of 2022. If you do have questions during the presentation, feel free to ask them in the chat window, or you can make a note and ask them in the breakout discussion. With that, let's get started. So we're going to look at why and how successful sales reps prospect with authority, using what they know as an effective tool in setting more appointments. So I wanted to start with a sort of B2B psychology quiz. What is it that motivates your prospect to act, to say yes to take your call, open or click on your email, agree to a meeting, buy your product? Because there must be a reason, right? Prospects get dozens of cold calls and emails every week, you know, because you all probably receive them yourself, some of which they act on and some of which they ignore. And timing and need are obvious reasons why a prospect might act on one call and ignore another, but they don't explain why some prospects answer, open, click, respond, and meet even if they don't have a pressing need for your product. So the question really is, what other forces are at work, and how exactly do they take that default state of inaction and nudge it toward action? And while we might like to think of ourselves and our prospects as completely rational people who consider all the relevant information and perform a rigorous cost-benefit calculation to help guide our decisions, the reality is we're not. We don't have the time or the bandwidth to do that. So instead, our brains use mental shortcuts to help us make decisions faster. Now, you may have heard of Dr. Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, and our longtime insiders definitely will know that book because we like to talk about it and its concepts often. But just to sum up, Dr. Cialdini is a professor of marketing and psychology, and his book is based on that premise that people use mental shortcuts to help them make decisions faster. And Dr. Cialdini identified 6 universal principles of persuasion, laying out specific triggers that activate those mental shortcuts. And we've done a presentation where we dive into each of these in a little bit more detail. As you can see from the slide, there's reciprocity, the idea that people feel obliged to give back to others what they have received. Commitment and consistency, people like to be consistent with the things they've previously said and done. Social proof, people look to the actions of others as a guide, especially when they're uncertain. Likability, people prefer to say yes to those they like and to whom they are similar. Authority, people following the lead of credible, knowledgeable experts. And scarcity, people want more of the things there are less of. Now, these aren't gimmicks. I want to be clear about that. They're psychological concepts that help explain how prospects synthesize information. So in the context of sales, they can be turned into strategies for clarifying your value, thereby nudging a prospect who's sitting on the fence and who may not yet realize that they can benefit from engaging with you toward action. And today, we're going to be talking about one of those principles, authority. We're going to take a closer look at exactly how it works on a psychological level, but we're also going to be talking about why it's such a critical concept in today's B2B sales landscape and how the most successful reps use it to achieve success with cold prospecting. So the framework is essentially that authority sets successful sales reps apart because merely asking questions about pain and selling your solution doesn't give your prospects a compelling enough reason to act. And as you can see, our resident B-Wise owls are sort of role-playing that scenario. When the sales rep uses what she knows to help her prospect see things differently, the prospect sees value and is more likely to act. Deborah, did you want to offer any introductory thoughts? I think you're on mute, Deb. Oh, okay. We're going to move on. So let's take a closer look at the psychology of authority, why people are hardwired to respond to it, and some real-world examples that demonstrate its effectiveness. So as I already mentioned, Cialdini's explanation of the principle of authority is that people follow the lead of credible, knowledgeable experts. So again, our owls are explaining the implicit transaction here. The offer is, I have knowledge and expertise in an area that you care about. And the natural response is, this person knows what they're talking about. I should listen to what they have to say. And one real world study showed that physical therapists get more patients to follow recommended exercise programs when they display their diploma on their office wall. The diploma reinforced the therapist's knowledge and expertise, so more patients listened to and followed their recommendations. And that's a pretty powerful impact when the only difference was a little piece of paper on the wall. Another study found that real estate agents generated more appraisals and contracts when receptionists mentioned their colleagues' credentials and expertise before transferring the call. So for example, when someone called looking for help leasing a property and the receptionist said, I'll transfer you to Lisa, who has over 15 years of experience in leasing properties in this area, it led to a 20% rise in the number of appointments and a 15% increase in the number of signed contracts. So again, pretty powerful stuff. And in the context of business development, there are a handful of common ways that sales reps and marketers use the concept of authority to entice people to act. So think of all the ad campaigns you've seen where experts are cited to lend credibility to a product. 4 out of 5 dentists agree, stuff like that. Then there's influencer marketing, where you market your product to and through people who can spread the word to others. That's been around for a long time, but it's taken on a new life and direction in the age of social media. So influencers influence people for a reason. They have credibility with their sometimes considerably large audiences who look to their actions as a guide. And the last one is where we'll really be focusing today, because it's the idea most relevant to B2B sales and prospecting, the idea that building and sharing your knowledge gives your prospects a reason to say yes, not just to buying your product, but when faced with all the other small decisions that come up over the course of your interaction. Deb, did you want to add anything? I think you're on mute, Deb. Oh, I can hear you.
Thank you, Sam.
Sorry.
Now I'm unmuted, which I couldn't do before. So thank you. Yeah, one of the things that I think is critical is the way we ask our questions and the kinds of questions that we're asking, in addition to what we're sharing. So you know you're on the right track when you hear your prospect say, oh, I hadn't thought of that before. Or, gee, I'm not sure. Whereas if we're asking questions that you could find out on your prospect's website, you know that we're in trouble. So we want to really make our prospects think, and that's a great way to show our authority.
Great, thanks. So we've looked at the powerful impact that the perception of authority can have on decision-making. So I'm going to use the next few minutes talking about how this can, should, and will play out in the context of B2B sales. So the first question is, where does your authority come from? How can you find it, and how can you grow it? And if there's one thing I hope you take away from this presentation, it's this. Recognize that you are likely already an authority on topics that your prospect really cares about and would really benefit from knowing, but doesn't yet. And the reason I think this is so critical is because in all of our discussions about value proposition and offering value at every stage of the conversation and having your authority and knowledge be that value, I feel like the initial reaction is so many sales reps say, well, I don't really know anything that my prospect doesn't already know. When in fact, you do. So start there with what you already know, because those insights, ideas, and experiences are ready-made value delivery systems that you can use to entice your prospects. So ask yourself, what do you know that your prospect doesn't? What do you know that will change your prospect's perspective on their own business and shape their future decisions? So here are a couple of more specific questions to help you home in on the kinds of valuable knowledge you likely already have. What has changed in your prospect's industry over the past 1, 3, or 5 years? Is there new technology emerging in your prospect industry? And what stories can you tell about how you've helped clients navigate technological transitions in the past? Are there new barriers to success in the industry? What are you seeing with your current clients in that regard? Where are the trends pointing, and what does that mean for achieving success in the future? And then the same question, but this time for your own industry. What has changed in your industry over the past 1, 3, or 5 years that your prospect might not know about? Again, is there new technology that you're using to help clients? An example from our own experience might be the advent of automated email prospecting campaigns that lead to more consistent and successful email lead gen with less effort on the part of our clients. 5 years ago, none of our clients were using this. They were using batch and blast email marketing. And today we have this technology that can help them overcome obstacles to consistent sending and generate steady stream of leads. And again, what obstacles are emerging and how are you advising clients to overcome them? What's easier? What's harder? How is the industry adapting? And then finally, one of my favorite questions, if you couldn't offer your product, how would you help your prospects? So based on the new technology and the new obstacles, what information can you convey that would lead to better decisions? So just a few takeaways from this section. You already know a lot. You're already an authority on issues critical to your prospect's success. You're also in a great position to learn more because you work in your field every day. You see what's happening in your industry, you see what's happening in your clients' industries, and you can develop insights that an individual client can't on his or her own. And you also have access to your clients, and they can tell you what they're seeing. So ask them and think about what their answers mean for your other clients and prospects. Do you have anything to add here?
Sure. There's a big difference between information and insights. And when I think about it, we all have access to Google, so we can find facts on virtually anything we want to know. But what we need to do is make sense of all these facts in the world of our prospects. And so it's making sense and making those connections that really hits the mark.
Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about how to deploy your authority for better biz dev results. Now, this is really the crux of the issue, obviously. Our ultimate goal as sales reps, of course, is to capture opportunities, set appointments, and sell stuff to prospects who will benefit from it. But it's also the most difficult piece of the puzzle because it means taking what you know and actually putting it out there in a way that will resonate with your prospects enough that they'll be interested in learning more, even if the conversation ends there. And that's not easy. So let's first think about where and when it's most important to offer value in the form of knowledge, insight, and expertise. If it isn't already obvious from what we said in the presentation to this point, your value must be bigger than just your product. Why? Because at that moment, when you cold call or cold email your prospects, they're likely not thinking about buying anything and may never become a client. Your product is the ultimate destination, the top of the mountain, but your prospects need a reason to get on the mountain in the first place, and they need a reason to climb to the next level. So there needs to be intrinsic value separate from your product at every stage of the journey. So returning to some of the questions that I posed at the beginning of the presentation, your prospect needs a reason to take your call, open your email, respond to your message, continue the conversation, agree to meet, and ultimately, of course, buy your product. And your own authority is a really compelling reason. It's the one thing that you can offer at each stage that sets you apart from everybody else. It's impossible to commoditize. So whenever you ask your prospect to take any action, present your knowledge and expertise as the value they will receive in return. And remember, the conversation may never go any further. And while that's not the ideal scenario, of course, it does force you to squeeze as much value into every interaction because you may not get another chance. So here's a helpful way to frame it. Imagine your prospect isn't just asking, why should I do this thing? Imagine they're asking, what do I get in return for doing this thing, even if I never become a client? And 3 really good answers are, they get knowledge. So one way to frame it might be, you'll learn the key forces and trends that will shape the industry over the next 12 to 18 months. They also get intelligence. You'll learn how other firms in your industry are adapting and staying ahead of the curve. And finally, and most importantly, those two things then translate into perspective. The information you'll gather will help you redefine success and clarify your decisions. Deb, anything to add here?
Sam, I love this slide. It does so many good things because number one, it's all about the prospect. You'll learn something. And here's the information that will help you. And that's certainly critical. At this point, we don't want to tell our prospects how long we've been in business and we have all these great clients and our products and services are better than anything else, because that's not the right time to discuss any of that. We're talking about these insights and the ability to share important information with our prospects. And I think this slide really says it all.
Thanks, Deb. And I also think, one of the hardest parts of this is taking the concept of authority resonates and I have authority into what are the words that I can say to a prospect that will get them to act on it. And so I wanted to offer this slide as just an example of how to frame your own authority in a way that will resonate with a prospect. And hopefully these key forces and trends and what other firms are doing in your industry are now understandable as things that you can get from the information and relationships that you already have. So I wanted to close out the presentation with something a little bit different. Since we're talking about authority, I thought it would be good to look at what some of the most authoritative voices on selling in 2022 have to say about the issue. So I've selected a handful of quotes from articles by experts in the field. And the first expert is Anthony Iannarino, who we've talked about before, whose website, The Sales Blog, is full of really excellent practical advice about how to successfully navigate today's selling landscape. And in a recent blog post, he wrote this: if your cold call provides neither value nor the promise of value, no client will make space on their calendar. And this quote really crystallizes the issue because it emphasizes the transactional nature of every stage of the sales process. If I don't get something, value, I'm not going out of my way to give you something, time on my calendar. So you might be asking yourself, well, shouldn't I just say I'll ask questions and listen to what they have to say? And Iannarino writes that, in fact, asking questions offers proof that you are not the value proposition, because it means you're asking more from your prospect in return for what? It's not, excuse me, it's not clear at this point. Okay, so then how should you provide that value? And this is a great quote. Iannarino writes that you should be part catalyst, part instigator, part agitator, and part prophet. So it's not really even your knowledge itself that's the value proposition. It's how that knowledge helps change perspective and create action. And according to Iannarino, that's really your ultimate goal: to teach your client what factors to consider, how to weight them, then exploring change to define their future potential. And none of those things is possible by just asking questions and hearing what your prospect already knows. And just one more slide before we wrap up. This one is from a white paper by the RAIN Group, which is a sales training organization in Boston. They write that today's sales winners go beyond uncovering buyer needs and matching their products and services to solutions to buyer problems. So this gets at that question from that last slide about why sales reps can no longer just ask questions to discover pain and then sell their solution. And the quotes on the right here are almost a perfect summary of what we've covered today. Sales winners find and communicate value. They provide valuable ideas and insights during the sales process. Sales winners change their prospects' perspective. They redefine buyer needs. And ultimately, sales winners become the value. The sellers themselves become the value. And this is exactly what today's buyers are looking for.